we're just filling sandbags to save Parkville.
We may not be able to stop it, I don't know.
You people are doing a great job. Let's go. You're doing a good job. It's dropping down. The water's dropping. Let's go.
We lost every type of battle we have. We're just going to let the river rise.
That was 51 foot, right?
No.
What was that?
Hello everyone, I'm Phil Witt. Welcome to a News Channel 4 special report on the raging Missouri and Kansas rivers. There's little doubt that the summer of '93 will be unforgettable. And in the next hour, you will get a very intimate look at why. So if you have a VCR, get a tape, press the record button, and save these incredible images along with us. We start with a quick update now on major developments of this day, because even though it appears as if we are over the hump, the sunshine certainly can't dry up a lot of the problems that the rain left behind. Even though the river's crested, we are still not out of the danger zone. The levee watch continues round the clock. At this bridge over the Kansas River in Kansas City, Kansas, the rise and fall of the water is measured every half hour. The water is still far above flood level, and no one knows just how well the levees will hold. It's easy to see why from the sky. We shot this video just before sunset. The river has swollen to record heights and record widths, swallowing hundreds of miles along the way. And it's very frustrating for evacuees from the Armourdale district of Kansas City, Kansas. They tried to go home today, but the National Guard told them no. And with all the debris that the water has picked up along the way, no one expected to see anything like this. Coffins floating downstream. No doubt about it, weeks of flooding are creating pure misery in our area. It all started 1 month ago, and at times it seemed like the heavy rains would never stop. News Channel 4's Larry Blunt gives us a good look back on how the flood of '93 came about.
June 28th is when it all began. At the time, the rain was welcome, but this was one visitor that wouldn't go away. After raining on and off for 2 days, on June 30th, late in the evening, it rained into July and didn't stop until at least 2 inches of rain fell in parts of Kansas City. If an inch doesn't sound like much, Mike Thompson puts it in perspective.
1 inch of rain evenly distributed on 1 square mile, you come up with 17,280,000 gallons of rainfall, rainwater, and that's 69,120 tons of water just within that square mile.
Through the first week of July, it rained some every day through the celebration on the 4th and beyond. But Mother Nature saved her own big bang for July 10th. That was the big rain. More than 6 inches of rain fell in areas of Kansas City. Two people died from flooding from Turkey Creek in the Southwest Boulevard area. There were only 3 days since June 28th that it didn't rain in Kansas City, while it rained more lightly after July 10th in Kansas City. On July 22nd, Northwest Missouri got smacked as badly as Kansas City did earlier in the month.
We just got a call from Jerry Lutz. He's been giving me information. Maryville in northwestern Missouri. They had 6.2 inches of rain last night.
Are you kidding?
No.
Heavy rains in northwest Missouri only added to an already swollen Missouri River, and we felt it downstream. The flooding claimed another life in Kansas City when a man was swept under the strong currents.
He went under, came up and started a dog paddle, like maybe he couldn't swim. Went back under, and that was the last they seen of him. I'm afraid that he probably got to the Missouri before we even arrived on the scene.
Last week, we continued to get rain every day in Kansas City, but it was much worse in central Kansas and Iowa, 4 to 7 inches. The Missouri and the Call were taking on more water. And finally, near Manhattan, Kansas, the Army Corps of Engineers had to release water from the Tuttle Creek and Milford reservoirs. At times, the Call was taking on 450 gallons of water a second, and that didn't include the rain that continued to fall during all last week. Many people watched in wonder as the Call and Missouri swelled to record levels. For those who have actually lived through the flood, there's been a great deal of work, and even more worry.
We got a little discouraged until we had the first opportunity to see the news and saw what other people had to deal with, and we realized then how lucky we were.
Come on, get to work.
Meet me over there exactly 11:30.
I want to save his company and other people's homes.
No matter how lucky or unlucky you were during the flood of '93, we'll probably never look at the rivers again the same way. And if you ever hear a child say the rhyme, "Rain, rain, go away, come again another day," you'll remember in the flood of '93, it did. Again and again and again. Larry Blunt, News Channel 4.
What a powerful summary.
Sure is.
We want you to understand just how all this water made it right here into Kansas City and our surrounding area, and that's why Mike Thompson, our meteorologist, has joined us. And Mike, some of this water actually started pumping here from 600 miles away.
No doubt about it. It's fairly easy to understand if you look at a topographical map like we have here, and this is just showing some of the major tributaries, basins, and lakes that we have around the area. You can see, of course, most of southwest Iowa, eastern Nebraska, northeast Kansas had between 1 and 3 feet of rain since April. And of course there's Tuttle Creek in Milford. That flows into the Kansas. We've got the Missouri, the Platte River up in Nebraska flows into that, the Nottoway, the Platte River in Missouri. So it all flows right down into Kansas City and converges. So if you look at that, and that doesn't count all the smaller tributaries and basins that flow in, very easy to see why we're having the problems now that we're having.
And some of that heavy rain up in South Dakota, where Lake Oahe is holding back rain, also southern Minnesota, northern Iowa, where there was heavy flooding earlier this month.
There's even some major flooding in North Dakota that eventually will work its way down. Hopefully we'll have time to dry up before it gets here. But major problems here, and major problems also across the state in eastern Missouri, where we've got some pictures from the Landsat satellite of the St. Louis area. As a benchmark, we use July 4th, 1988 to show the Missouri River.
Look at how thin.
The normal size, about the size of a pencil, really.
What, a couple of 100 yards across, perhaps? Maybe not even that much.
Maybe not that much. The Mississippi River, rather, a little bit wider at times. Then let's compare that with the picture on July 18th. It's a lake. At points, we measured it over 5 miles wide, the Mississippi, just north of St. Louis, and an average of 3 miles wide along the Missouri River. So there's a major flow. We don't have the Landsat pictures available from the Kansas City area because the satellite only takes pictures about every 16 days. We hope to have that eventually, but I'm sure it looks very, very similar.
Astounding graphics from the air. We also have another map that we want to show you as well, which indicates those areas that have been evacuated in Kansas City. Of course, it all started July 4th right here in the Bean Lake area, right between St. Joe and Kansas City. That was the first level of evacuations. The very next night here in Kansas City, Kansas, the Walcott area of Kansas City, Kansas was evacuated, the A1 Mobile Home Park. And in subsequent order, in the Great Flood on July 10th, of course, where Southwest Boulevard and the Kaw River overflowed, those areas were evacuated. Just over the weekend along here at Riverside and Parkville, evacuations were ordered when the levees finally gave way, the sandbag levees. Up in Elwood, Kansas, and right across the river in St. Joe, those areas were evacuated both earlier this month and again over the weekend. And areas we have not highlighted for you, but Pattonsburg and Hardin, Missouri also were evacuated earlier this month. So that gives you an indication where thousands of families in both Missouri and Kansas have been evacuated over the last 2, 3, and 4 weeks, ever since July 5th, when the flooding really started in Bean Lake, where it always seems to start up there in
most of the bad areas have gotten it, and some areas that really don't expect to have rain or this kind of flooding problems are seeing problems.
All right. Well, no new evacuations to report tonight, and that is good news. But the need for help is far from over. There's a tremendous amount of work to be done. Harris Faulkner is out in the middle of the action tonight on the Kansas side, Indian Springs Mall. And Harris volunteers are still sandbagging around the clock there. Obviously, they don't believe that the crisis is over.
Well, Phil, you know, everywhere we go, we see a different look at what the floods have brought. And what we're looking at now, determination and caring. I estimate there's some 300 volunteers out here. They're working 12-hour shifts. It's a mixture tonight. People from all over the community, as well as the street division of the city's department. And they are working after hours here on their own time to help volunteer. Again, my own humble estimations, probably about 100 yards of sandbagging going on here. The sandbags will be taken to the Fairfax district, James Street. You saw in the crowd there are children, of all ages out here, people from all over the community, and we'll talk with some of those people a little bit later in the cast here. Many people in our area who have been evacuated will be sleeping again tonight on a cot or a floor, and you've got to know that that's rough. Luxuries like a microwave oven, not there. And something that's probably really key, no privacy. News Channel 4's Rhonda Schulting caught up with one family who's making do in the home away from home.
You want me to take them out to the car?
It's moving day for the Dillon family of Kansas City, Kansas. Mary Dillon, her mom, dad, and 9-month-old daughter Emily are headed to a new home. They lost theirs when the Kansas River spilled into their mobile home park. And after spending 9 days at the Red Cross shelter at Schlegel High School, they're taking their things to their new apartment. Their loss is still too fresh to comprehend.
We drove by I-70 and looked down there, and it's still a shock. You can't believe it's happened.
100 people now call this shelter home. For the Dillons, it was uncomfortable at first.
It was strange, but they're also friendly. That was what worried me the most, is I'm going to sleep with people I don't even know.
A dozen people to be exact, and all in this room where the handles of a file cabinet serve as a clothes closet, a place where privacy is a very valuable commodity.
But you got people here that come in and out and turn the lights on and off, and it's kind of hard. I mean, but you deal with it.
I'm gonna miss you.
But all this togetherness turned the people who stay here, people who didn't know each other before, into close friends.
A lot of friends.
And it's taught the Dillons that despite all the things that have happened to them, you must never give up hope.
I learned that if you try hard enough, you can get through anything. You just take day by day.
And that is all anyone can do. Rhonda Schulting, News Channel 4.
Such courage and determination, as I was saying earlier. Now, as those people live their lives in shelters, we know that that's got to be tough. Imagine living without any running water. You'd have to resort to bottled water like this, and that's been the case for people in St. Joseph, certainly. And we want to go to News Channel 4's Kelly Waldo, who's in that area now. And Kelly can certainly tell us about how tough it's been. They've been without running water, tap water, since Sunday. Kelly, and I understand they don't know when to expect it.
No, Harris, it may be several more days. Now, as Phil mentioned earlier, the rain has stopped, but the people who live here in St. Joseph wouldn't mind seeing a little bit more water, the kind that runs out of your faucet. Now, there are plenty of water distribution sites like you see here over my shoulder. You can take as much water with you as you can carry, but they'd much rather have it at home because it isn't getting any easier.
When the news about the water plant went out Saturday night, Johnny Christian thought, okay, we don't drink that much water anyway, no problem.
So I was like, oh, we can have pop, you know, that's no big deal if we don't have water. And I was not thinking of just not able to wash clothes with the baby. I'm lucky she doesn't spit up very much or anything like that, or I'd be in trouble. And washing the crib sheets and, you know, that type of thing.
And how do you explain to a 3-year-old that you can't flush the toilet anymore, especially when you just got through teaching them how to do it? And that's not all.
Have you got to take a bath with your toys?
No, I can't.
No, you can't. Why can't you?
Because there's no water in my bathtub.
Johnny says her biggest concern is about the baby.
Bottled water instead of the ones that they're giving away, because I'm afraid they're saying to boil it longer, but it still scares me to fix up formula. So for the baby formula, I've been using the bottled water, but I go ahead and boil it too, because when you make formula anyway, it tells you to boil the water.
Disposable diapers and Playtex bottles are a lifesaver, but you've still got to sterilize. And with a 3-month-old baby and a husband who works in a casting factory, laundry can be a monumental problem. But Johnny says compared to some of her family, being without water is a small price to pay.
They live down at Sugar Lake, and their house, they've lived there 25 years and they never had water in their house, and they look like they've got quite a bit right now.
So while these people are doing without water, there are many others in worse situations. They have no place left to call home.
Okay, thanks a lot, Kelly. Unfortunately, the people of Lexington, Missouri are also living without running water tonight. Their problem started early Tuesday morning when water from the Missouri River flooded the city's water plant. The people at the town's health center got the only water until trucks arrived in the afternoon. Even then, rationing means everybody gets only 3 gallons a day. No one's sure right now when the tap water will be back on. And as for the status tonight for other areas with water problems, continue to boil your water if you live in Parkville, Riverside, Platte Woods, Lake Waukomis, Houston Lake, Platte County Water District 6, Lexington, Weston, and unincorporated areas of southern Platte County that are served by the Missouri Cities Water Company. And you need to conserve water still if you live in Kansas City, Kansas, Kansas City, Missouri, or Liberty. People in Leavenworth and Gallatin, Missouri are asked to only use water for cooking, drinking, and toilet flushing. Well, nearly 250,000 people know exactly how it feels to live without water, just like the people in St. Joseph and Lexington. A little bit different, though, in Des Moines, Iowa, in that they've been living that way for much longer. We want to go live now to John Bachman, who's with WHO-TV in Des Moines. And John, I understand that the water department manager today was making great strides. He went around, did some testing, and it looks like you all could have drinking water sooner than you expected.
We're certainly hoping so, Harris. We're hoping to have drinking water early next week now. At first, they had estimated it might take 2 or 3 weeks after we got our water back to get pure drinking water, but now it's looking like, oh, hopefully just a few more days. We're going to hold out and hope that that's true.
Well, John, you know, I'm sure for people with special needs, the elderly, this has had to be tough for them. But what's it been like for families with children not having any water?
It was very difficult. We really went a stretch of about 12 days without any water at all. And then when we did get water back, as we mentioned, it's non-drinkable water, and you have to be very careful because kids, even though the water's back, they think that they can go back to brushing their teeth the same old way. You have to be very careful so they don't get bacteria, and you have to keep a watch out on them. But when they didn't have any water at all, it caused all kinds of stress and emotional turmoil, really, for a lot of families. At first it's fun, but when you go 12 days, it becomes a real trying experience for everyone involved.
Well, John, you bring up a good point here with the emotional stress. How are people faring?
We have the light at the end of the tunnel now. So we've got blue skies and sunshine, and we've been through this for 2.5 weeks now. Things are looking better. We're around the corner. Spirits are lifted. But I'll tell you, about a week ago, it was very, very difficult. And my only warning would be to hang in there. Volunteers help so much. Sharing your troubles and helping each other out, that helps you get through the whole experience. And it's very, very difficult, the early stages.
Okay, thank you very much, John Bachman. We share that light at the end of the tunnel with you from Des Moines. Thanks so much. Well, it may be the least of your problems right now, but money troubles could be around the corner for you if you're a flood victim. Coming up a little later in the program, I'll show you how to get around that, Phil.
All right, Harris, thanks a lot for that information. We will check back with you in a few minutes.
Okay.
People fought to save their lives, their property, and in one city north of Kansas City, they're fighting to save the entire town. And coming up next, the incredible story of something eerie floating in the floodwater.
This News Channel 4 special is brought to you by your hometown telecommunications company, Sprint, answering the call for flood relief.
It's kind of amazing the power that, like, nature has.
Is that amazing? Water rushing out of Brush Creek on July 10th. And that is the night of the flash flood that inundated the Southwest Boulevard and then quickly receded, but so far is the only major damage in the immediate Kansas City, Missouri area. One of the most amazing sights of the flood, though, came today when coffins began floating down the Missouri River. News Channel 4's Dan Munson tells us where they came from and why.
More than a dozen coffins, along with steel and concrete burial vaults, sit tied off at what's become the shore of the Missouri River. Melvin Heil and his family have farmed the land around here for decades.
I didn't know we built right against the cemetery.
For the last couple days, the floodwaters have been unearthing the burial sites at the Hardin Cemetery. So far, coffins have floated miles downriver to Norborn and beyond.
To give you an idea of just how powerful these floodwaters can be, consider this. This coffin here weighs about 400 pounds, but these concrete vaults over there, well, they check in about 1,500 pounds. And the waters carried all these coffins upwards of 10 miles from their original resting place.
Crews work throughout the day recovering the coffins, but it's a slow and tedious task.
The wind is really our biggest factor today because it's causing boats and the vaults to all try to go different directions, and we're having a lot of problems.
The coffins are being taken back to Ray County, where Coroner Dean Snow will have the job of identifying all the remains.
We will be having to do a documentation of each vault.
And that process could take months, even longer if the vaults and caskets are broken open in the floodwaters.
I'd hate for my in-laws to be floating around like that.
Amidst all the work that's left ahead, there's an underlying fear. The Hardin Cemetery has about 500 burial sites, and there's no telling how many more will be unearthed. Near Norborn, Missouri, Dan Munson, News Channel 4.
The Carroll County coroner says even if human remains are washed out of the coffins, there's no additional health risk. He says that's because the floodwaters are already badly contaminated. Well, here's a dangerous sight in the river, a very volatile morning in Jefferson City. The rising river ripped away a propane tank and carried it downstream. The whole time it was spewing out propane gas. Several hundred people were evacuated in the area. The tank finally ran aground on a road where emergency crews were able to control the situation. One other note out of Jefferson City, US 63, the main road to Columbia, is closed again because of high water along the Missouri River. Well, the magnitude of what we've been through gets a little overwhelming after a while, and Mike, it's really incredible to think about the amount of rain we have just had in the space of about a month.
And we were trying to illustrate or figure out a way to illustrate how much rain we've actually had, and it's pretty incredible. Of course, we have to base our rainfall amounts on what we get from the official rain gauge at Kansas City International Airport. And if we can take a look at some of these beakers, here's the official amount so far, just a little over 4 inches for the month of July. Or actually, this is normal, 4 inches for the month of July. This is what has fallen at KCI so far, which is about 10.7 inches. Now, of course, many areas of the metropolitan area have received a lot more than that.
Double that.
Easily. In fact, we had one report of up to 21 inches of rainfall this month so far, which is right about there. Compare that to normal. And there's just no comparison at all. It wins out hands down. And believe it or not, last July, officially, was the wettest July on record. But as you can see, unofficially, that
perhaps will eclipse that now.
And you might have to.
And you add that to all of that rain that fell upstream from us, which we have already talked about.
Right.
It's no wonder we've had this problem.
Tons and tons and tons of water. And a lot of people have asked me why we had this problem. Why has it persisted so long? Well, I've got a couple maps to show you. First of all, here's the upper level wind flow that we've had persisting for most of July. As you can see, it brought a lot of tropical air up from Texas and the Gulf of Mexico. The jet stream was parked right over the top. We think that's because Mount Pinatubo cooled the northern latitudes enough to force that jet stream southward. Also, the El Nino, which is the abnormally warm Pacific seawater temperatures, allowed a lot more moisture to be injected into the air, caught up in the upper winds, and combined with that jet stream right over us. So what that made is a pattern that produced storm after storm after storm after storm over the same location. Also a heat wave through the southeast. Finally, though, we are seeing a break. High pressure is building up. That's shifting the jet stream well to the north of us and diving down through the southeast. That's going to give us and them relief. Rain for the south is likely for the next few days. We'll see some warm, dry weather heading our way, and it looks like that could persist into next week. So maybe for just a little while we'll be out of this national spotlight. But the floods and all the news, I think it'll take a while for that information to die down. And for perspective on the national spotlight and all the news that we're seeing from around the country in the Midwest, Phil has a very special guest who happens to be in town this evening. Yeah. Phil?
All right, Mike, thanks a lot. Yes, next to me you will recognize this face, all you early morning risers who watch News Channel 4. You've seen it most recently on the Today Show, but now Margaret Larson, who used to anchor the news on the Today Show, is a roving reporter, and you've been following this story now, this flood, this great flood of '93 from the Mississippi River, now over to the Missouri River into Kansas City. Margaret, as you followed this as it became a national story, what are your observations as you've taken a look at the effects of the flooding on the eastern side and on the western side here?
I think probably the most noticeable feature of this flood is the fact that it has been such a slow motion catastrophe, unlike a hurricane or a tornado that strikes and then allows people to get in immediately and have the emotional satisfaction of beginning to clean up and rebuild. This has been weeks in building, and it's going to be weeks or months going away. It may never resolve for some people who've been wiped out. So I think the emotional toll and the kind of energy commitment it takes from a psychological point of view to recover from this is much greater than many other disasters.
What's the sense around the country? What are your colleagues saying at NBC News about how people are reacting to this crisis in places like your hometown, Seattle, New York City, Chicago, what have you?
People are very concerned. I mean, they obviously can feel for what happens when you lose your home, when you lose your business, when you can't get back to the things that are familiar and important to you.
when families are under this kind of a crisis, I think this is the sort of thing everybody can understand and respond to. In fact, it's been my observation that there has been so much sent in the way of clothing and supplies that many relief agencies have been saying, please no more. The Red Cross, for example, instead, could you send us cash so we're able to buy the supplies and relief that's necessary in individual areas? Something everybody cares about quite a great deal.
Margaret, we saw one of the most eerie sights already. We've shown our viewers that, the coffins that have sprung up in the Missouri River now. What are some of the most lasting memories for you as you've covered the story?
I think it's not a sight but a smell in Iowa along the Mississippi, and it's happening here as well. The floodwaters have in many cases broken septic tanks, caused sewage to back up. So much of what's inside people's homes is not just water, it's a sludge that's mixed with all sorts of debris and sewage. And that's the sort of thing I think that is so depressing, because you realize many of these places will never be cleaned up, will never be the same, and it is the kind of damage that stays with people for weeks at a time.
Right, and Margaret, it'll be the kind of story that we'll cover for weeks and months, long after our colleagues at NBC News and other national media have sort of forgotten it and gone on to the next big story.
That will happen, no doubt. It always does. That's the entire purpose of having local news coverage as well.
Thank you, Margaret Larson.
My
Appreciate you being here to carry this message to the rest of the United States and the world.
Thanks.
All right. Of all the flood stories we have covered, the account of the Ball family of Parkville ranks as one of the most dramatic and inspirational. Their motto was never give up until the Missouri rushed in.
And everybody needs to help everybody else, because there's always somebody down the road that you don't think about that's taking on water right now. If you know of anybody, go help them, even if it's just to say, I'm sorry.
Defeat, no. Not admitted until it comes over the wall.
No defeat, not for them, and not where I'm standing tonight. These people don't believe in it. They're simply working too hard. Well, with me now is a man who's responsible for a lot of the kids who are out here tonight. Michael Basie is here. And Michael, tell me you've brought some of your group home teenagers out here, and tell me what you guys are doing and why.
Basically, we're just out here donating some of our time. Some of the stuff that comes to the group home are donations themselves, and we're basically just out here giving some back to the community and showing the community that people are behind them and just giving them a helping hand.
Now, have any of the teenagers that you're working with tonight been exposed as flood victims at all?
No. Of course, where we're located at, we've been very close to almost being flood victims ourselves. But due to the rain stopping just a little bit, we weren't circumstanced to move or evacuate our premises or anything.
All right, Michael, thank you very much. Now we want to talk with someone from the city who's here organizing this entire thing. His name is Mike Thompson, and maybe Mike can come on over and chat with us. Basically what we're seeing tonight, they are doing some picking up of sandbags now. Mike, maybe you can tell us about what's going on, because there's a lot of activity out here.
Well, we're just, right now we're kind of piling them up here and kind of storing them in case we have a break in the levee or any other emergencies that we can use them for. We probably have, I'd say, 30 foot by 30 foot and a block long worth of bags.
Well, where you guys are working so hard out here, when you heard about the rivers going down, what was the response from all the volunteers?
Well, the response was good, but and really that doesn't mean much, because the water is really saturating the levees to where, they could still go at any time. So the danger is not really over yet. And so we're just anticipating by stockpiling these bags, by being ready regardless of what happens.
All right, Mike Thompson with the city, thank you very much for joining us. Well, Phil, we want to go back to you now.
All
and
right,
just tell you that these people are, like I said, I can't say it enough, they are out here for good. They're not going to go away until the water recedes. They're very determined.
That's very inspirational there, the spirit of cooperation and volunteerism going on. Thanks, Harris.
It's catchy.
Actually, that same spirit of volunteerism and that inspiration of people working side by side to try to keep Mother Nature and the floodwater from raging in has been taking place for the better part of this month. The trouble is that is usually followed all over the region by the disappointment when the flood actually does take over and breaks through the sandbag walls that have been built up by those hundreds and thousands of volunteers. Some people in Parkville in Platte County closed shop when the floodwaters raged toward town, but the Ball family stayed. They spent $30,000 to build a gravel barrier between the river and their business. News Channel 4's Lisa Reinhardt joins us live with more. And Lisa, We followed Bob and Debbie Ball as they fought the Missouri River to keep their business.
You bet, Phil, and that's why we decided to check back with them today to see just how they're holding up. What we found was an inspiring story of courage and optimism. This was Ball Power and Lawn Equipment a week ago. The owners, Bob and Debbie Ball, built a gravel levee around the building, hoping to keep out the water. Here's what their business looks like today.
Right now, the water in the showroom is about 11 feet deep. Make it kind of tough to sell equipment today. It was like an old friend that I'd spent a lot of time with, and we had to disconnect the life support on it when we unhooked the pumps.
Their 17-year-old business is gone, but their optimism isn't.
We lost this, but we've still got our pillows to lay our heads down on. And if everybody will just hang in there, don't give up. Don't give up. The fight's not over.
Do you look at the river now as less of a friend than it used to be?
No, no. She's just trying to take back what was her own. I mean, no, I can't even say I'm mad at the river. I truly can't.
Bob and Debbie say they're determined to stay at this spot along the river near the gazebo where they were married. Both insist they're lucky because they didn't lose their home, but they're worried about the many people around them who did.
Now it's time, you know, to help your own. And no one was expecting this, but we need Kansas City's help now.
An amazing couple. Bob and Debbie are very busy these days, not worrying about their own flooded business, but helping out all their neighbors who right now are facing these terrible floodwaters. And while the Balls plan to stay put, many people here in downtown Parkville, which is so flooded, under 8 feet of water in many places, are having to find new homes right now. That includes the police department, which is located right now at Park College. Speaking of Park College, I do want to let you know if you're a student or faculty member, you will have class tomorrow. Actually, you're going to have finals tomorrow, wouldn't you know it? But we do want to let you know that Aero Mechanics School here in town will stay closed for now. We'll send it back to you.
Life goes on with college finals, Lisa.
You bet. Got to get back to reality. Get back to the books.
Thanks a lot, Lisa, for that profile of Bob and Debbie Ball. Well, the town is underwater, but the people of Elwood, Kansas are not giving up. Doug Schimel joins us with the latest on that. And News Channel 4 is offering a videotape of tonight's special. If you'd like a copy of that, here's the information on your screen. It costs $10, but the money goes to the American Red Cross to help flood victims. We can thank Heartland Custom Cassettes and Casey News Clips for their help in this effort. Southwest Boulevard, the flood of July 10th in Kansas City, Missouri. An event that officials were worried would repeat itself this week if the Kansas and Missouri rivers flooded again. Businesses along Southwest Boulevard are dark tonight. Some have not reopened since that flash flood 3 weeks ago. The others are empty after the mayor asked them to leave Monday, a request he repeated tonight. It is one more tough blow for a district which has seen its share of water headaches over the years, and Dave Helling is there now. Dave, in the past, the boulevard has always bounced back. What about this time?
Phil, it gets harder and harder each time it rains. In fact, some of the businesses along the boulevard say they may never come back. First, today's news. Mayor Cleaver told reporters around 6 this evening that he wants to keep the boulevard evacuated, and the West Bottoms for that matter. The mayor says he is still concerned about the high levels on both the Missouri and the Kansas rivers. The folks along the boulevard know all about problems with rivers.
Workers at the Higgins Bindery turned on the machines for the first time today, 18 days after Turkey Creek roared down the boulevard into this factory and halfway up its wall.
And it would have covered all
of the... see all the machines, the lift boards even got it.
It was a disaster, of course, but not unprecedented. 3 times in a decade, pouring rains in the Turkey Creek Basin have ripped through these streets, destroying homes, businesses, lives. Amid the muck and mud, boulevard businesses have struggled for weeks to recover, borrowing mayoral elbow grease for a ton. Some, like the popular Ponak's restaurant, reopened briefly, only to shut again as the Kansas River rose. Others, like Margarita's across the street, defied the evacuation order and continued to rebuild, barely hiding their bitterness that flooding here is a nightmare that won't go away.
I think it gets lack of attention because it's not the Country Club Plaza or anything, and they do all the work for the plaza, but they won't do nothing for down here.
You know, they put a man on the moon, they can spend all that money, they can research bees, but they can't divert water.
In truth, though, fixing the boulevard may take as long as going to the moon and will be only slightly less expensive. By most estimates, it'll take $75 to $100 million to fix the flooding problem, a fix that won't start until 1996 at the absolute earliest. Whatever the answer, Phil Higgins may not be here to see it.
I don't want to go through this again, though. It's very hard to answer that question now.
Phil, already along the boulevard, they are trying to figure out how to prevent another flood tragedy. It is a problem not just here, but in this community, in this state, indeed the entire Midwest. A debate that will continue for months after the Great Flood of '93 is gone.
And many of the answers to that debate take place in Washington, D.C., 1,500 miles from here, regardless of what we might want to do right here in the heartland.
That's exactly right.
All right, thank you very much, Dave. No one town may have been hit harder in this flood than Elwood, Kansas. The flood water just swallowed up the town, the whole town, located just across the swollen Missouri River from St. Joseph. One newspaper report even reported that the town would not come back. But our Doug Schimel heard something different when he met with hundreds of Elwood residents this afternoon in St. Joseph. Doug?
Yeah, Phil, this is what triggered that mild wave of panic. It was this morning's edition of the St. Joseph News Press, which, as you can see, the headline states very plainly, "Elwood is gone," team says. Now, while it is true you cannot see the town right now, and all of its 1,000 plus residents are living in either St. Joseph or some other surrounding communities, in this particular case, residents say that they're not done for. They don't like being written off in this fashion, at least the way the paper had put it. They say that they have been relocated 3 times in their history because of flooding, and every single time they have come back. Well, the newspaper says that all their reporter was doing was simply quoting a disaster crew that was out in Elwood touring it by boat yesterday. And they say they don't like being shot at simply because they are the messenger. Well, coming up tonight at 10, we will examine the question, where exactly is Elwood? Phil?
A good question. All underwater. Doug,
Indeed.
We'll check with you again at 10.
See you shortly.
We want to help you and your family stay healthy before and after the flood water recedes. We'll show you what to look for next. People displaced by floodwaters have plenty of help available, but what about our 4-legged flood victims? That's next too. There's your wake-up call, your warning. Floodwaters are hazardous to your health. So far, there have been few injuries and illnesses, but it's too soon to let your guard down as cleanup begins. Marilyn McCain has joined us now to remind us all of those flood-related things that may be a threat to our health. Marilyn?
Phil, like the snake that one Platte County family found in their yard. It isn't that there are any more snakes around now, it's just that they're moving to higher ground.
Yes, but I thought copperhead.
And yes, some of them are poisonous, like this copperhead. But experts say if you don't bother them, they won't bite you, so steer clear. Mosquitoes aren't so easy to avoid. They hatch like crazy in standing water. Health officials will monitor them to see if any carry encephalitis, a rare disease which causes brain swelling and even death in humans. In the meantime, do your part by getting rid of water in old tires, buckets, and pans.
If you have standing water in the backyard, maybe take a broom and sweep it, and spread it out so it soaks into the ground.
During cleanup, be aware that anything the floodwater has touched may have bacteria on it. It can make you sick if you swallow it.
We're concerned that within 2 days to 2 weeks that we may start seeing severe abdominal cramping and severe diarrhea that's going to affect especially little children and the elderly.
Wash your hands frequently to prevent that. Also remember that dirty, even toxic debris is everywhere. Don't go barefoot like this young man did and run the risk of a cut or puncture wound and infection. Of course, the greatest risk is tetanus or lockjaw. The bacteria is in the dirt that you may get in a wound. So far in Wyandotte County alone, 1,800 people have taken the precaution of getting a tetanus booster. All of us should get one at least every 10 years, Phil, because the bacteria is around all the time, not just during the flood.
Important information, too, as you correctly pointed out, as we begin the cleanup now when the waters do recede.
Very important now.
Thanks, Marilyn. There are health concerns for people and for pets. If you have pets that have endured the flood, veterinarians say they should be checked for heartworms. But Harris, we've discovered that a lot of pets, dogs and cats especially, are homeless because of the flood.
Well, Phil, if you could see me, I'm standing on a pile of sandbags. I've got a flood shovel in my hand here, a couple of things that mean a lot. To kind of segue into something that also means a lot to us out here, the Great Flood of 1951, a bit of history. When the river flooded, the stockyards and livestock would float until they hit a roof, and then they'd be stranded there. In this year's Great Flood, however, family pets have had a bewildering existence. They have not had any place for it to go at emergency shelters. Of course, emergency shelters can't take in family pets. As News Channel 4's Terry Schaefer reports, in Kansas City, Kansas, the pet shelters have been chocked full of refugee pets.
It's been like the grapes of wrath for both people and their pets. They've had to get out and haven't known where they'll end up. Well, it's not home, but at least it's not wet. Scores of refugee pets from Kansas City, Kansas are spending time in the Kansas City, Kansas Animal Shelter free of charge.
Well, when A1 had to evacuate, my officers went in by boat and brought animals out from the trailer homes, or that were just tied up, or any animals that we could rescue. And we have a rabbit, and we have birds and hamsters.
The animal shelter here in Kansas City, Kansas is all full of flooded out animals like this one. And all the veterinarians in town are busy too, because all the veterinarians have taken the overflow from the animal shelter. Their human friend's new home may not be like the home they had to evacuate. The new home may be in a place that doesn't allow pets. If so, some of these lovable and homeless creatures might need new homes. Terry Schaefer, News Channel 4.
By the way, we will let you know if those pets are reunited with their owners. We'll be following their future for you. Well, I found a way that you can cut back, or at least keep a watch on and take some control over money problems you've been having since the flood began. We'll take a look at that after this. Well, many people are planning to move back to their homes now, and if that's what you're planning to do, maybe you haven't had a lot of flood damage, maybe you have, we have some things you need to be thinking about. First of all, when you go back to your home, clean, clean, clean. We can't stress that enough. The health department warns many dangers may have washed in with the floodwaters. Wash your walls, carpets, and furnitures with bleach. It kills mold and mildew the best. And clean the filters of your air conditioners and heating vents. And if the water got into those vents, you should have a professional look at it before turning it on. And if any food got wet, throw it away. Canned foods can be rinsed off the top lids of them, and those are salvageable. And if your mattress and pillows were soaked by the floodwaters, throw them out. The health officials say it's impossible to get mold and mildew out of those items. Well, having to throw things away is certainly evidence of the fact that nothing comes cheap with this flood crisis. Absolutely. Even if you're trying to ignore some of the bills that you had before, you just can't. They'll catch up with you. And the Great Flood of 1993 could soon turn into the Great Depression of 1993 if you're not careful. For your money, how to deal with the people you owe if you're a flood victim. Here's a problem. Mailboxes several feet under. How do you pay your bills if they cannot reach you? Don't try using that excuse with your creditors, but they will understand your troubles if you contact them now, especially if you need to miss a payment or two because of the flooding. When you call them, ask for the Emergency Services Department, Flood Task Force, or a special number they may have set up for flood customers. If they promise not to report you to credit bureaus because you're late, get it in writing. And in the worst case, the late payments could tarnish your record. If that happens, add a statement to your credit report saying you're a flood victim. And remember, delaying payments may prevent you from using your credit card. Now, if you can still use your card, don't let them talk you into a higher credit limit during the flood crisis.
If you're in a crisis right now, now's not the time to be borrowing a lot of money because your ability to pay it back is suffering. It's going to be a while before you get back on your feet. Don't be so willing to borrow a lot of money right now. Take care of the basics, wait till things get back to normal. So be cautious of that.
While you're being cautious, some local banks are doing more than just collecting supplies for flood victims. Boatman's, for example, is advertising a flood relief program complete with deferred loan payments. What I'm holding up right now is a letter that many flood victims are receiving, and I want to read just a little bit of this to you. Dear customer, it was with extreme regret that we learned of the damage caused by the recent floodwaters in the Midwest. We at Texaco are concerned that you and your family may have been personally affected by this unfortunate disaster and wish to cooperate if help is needed. Texaco, Amoco, and several other companies are sending out letters just like this to people. So there are credit companies and people that you owe who will definitely understand what you're going through. But rule number one, as you saw, you got to communicate with them. Phil?
All good information, Harris. And one more thing to pass along to our viewers for your money is the fact that all sorts of companies will be coming in, some of them unscrupulous, to help you with cleanup. So be very careful when you contract with a company to help you with your cleanup after this flood. You could be victimized more than once. You can help flood victims and get something to remember the flood victims as well. Get something to write with. We'll have more on that in a minute. And the irresistible impulse that drew hordes of people to the riverside. People who had to see it all to believe it. Their story is next.
This News Channel 4 special is brought to you by your hometown telecommunications company, Sprint, answering the call for flood relief.
An event like the Great Flood of '93 is something we hope we'll have to endure once in a lifetime. By some predictions, once every 500 years. Maybe that's why people came from miles around to see it for themselves. News Channel 4's Pam McKelvey reports on the summer's hottest attraction and people who wanted the best seat in the house.
There's still more time on this. Do you guys want to look?
Astonishment, disbelief, and just plain old curiosity. A wave of people with a trendy new name are stopping to look at the flooding at places like the Broadway Extension.
We were laughing. We were up driving around it by Briarcliff West, and we're seeing all these people, and we're calling them gawkers, and we're calling ourselves the gawkers that are out driving around just checking it out, sightseers.
At first, flood watchers just trickled into High Points to gaze at the swollen Kansas and Missouri rivers.
It's the worst I've ever seen.
Then as the river grew, so did the stream of watchers.
The other day you could see the writing on it, and now the sign's almost completely buried by water.
Now there's a flood of properly equipped sightseers.
Who are you going to show the pictures to?
Grandkids later on down whenever I have kids. Mom, Dad, and whoever.
Sightseers don't just take pictures either. They make home videos like this one by Shawnee, Kansas flood photographer Pat Hill. Some of the watchers are in awe of the rivers for the second time, which brings back memories of the '51 flood.
Well, we didn't have any water. Southwest Boulevard, those tanks broke loose and fire all over the place. It was rough.
Natural phenomena like this don't happen often, so seeing it for yourself makes you a part of history. History that's passed down through stories and pictures. Pictures that are worth 1,000 words. Pam McKelvey, News Channel 4.
The floodwater eventually will go away, but we won't soon forget the havoc that the overflowing rivers have caused. News Channel 4 is offering a videotape of tonight's special. If you'd like a copy, here's the information on your screen. The video costs $10. All the money goes to the American Red Cross to help flood victims. And again, we want to thank Heartland Custom Cassettes and KC News Clips for their help in this effort. We'll repeat that information during our 10 o'clock news, which is coming up next. No, we won't forget the havoc that the raging waters have caused, but neither will we forget the enduring spirit of Heartlanders to survive and recover. And that is the Raging Missouri, the flood of '93, our News Channel 4 special report. Thanks for joining us. Good night, everybody.